Who would have thought that James Wan's breakout film would be the famous Saw? Not only was the film shot in just 18 days, but it also grossed over $1 billion worldwide that year. 500,000 domestic netizens even gave a high score of 8.7. And all of this is inseparable from the plot of this series of drama settings. Today, we continue with Saw V. The man suddenly woke up from a coma and realized that he was tied up. A situation that left Seth stupefied. Before he can figure out what's going on, a kidnapper wearing a clown mask appears on the TV.
Hello, Seth. I want to play a game.
The captor spoke a condemning message to Seth, and he wanted to play a twisted game of survival with him. The blade above Seth's head will activate in 30 seconds, and in 60 seconds he will be cut in half. In order to survive, Seth will have to break his chains. Seth has switch buttons on both sides of his left and right hands to open the shackles. However, activating the buttons will also trigger a mechanical device that crushes his hands.
To dust, will you destroy the things that have taken life in order to save one, Seth? Make your choice.
As the countdown begins, the pendulum blade above starts to swing. Seth is terrified by what he sees. In order to survive, Seth can only comply with the kidnapper's request. With great difficulty, he manages to activate both switches, but the shackles on his body show no signs of opening. It's only when his hands are crushed that Seth realizes the kidnapper had no intention of letting him live. As the 60 seconds elapse and the pendulum blade descends, Seth is cut in half amidst despair. The outside kidnapper witnesses this gruesome process firsthand. From the previous episode, we know that Agent Strahm was locked in a secret room by Hoffman. The lights go out in the room, and there is no cell phone signal. But in the darkness, Strahm notices a hidden door painted with luminous paint. Strahm immediately opens the door to investigate. Inside, he discovers a hanging tape recorder that catches his attention. The recording features the voice of Jigsaw, who has already passed away. Jigsaw advises Strahm not to delve deeper into the truth behind the secret room case, warning him that it will only lead to danger.
My warning, do not proceed, for this room can either be your sanctuary, or it can be your grave. The choice is yours.
Ignoring the threat from a dead man, Strahm chooses to enter the passage behind the hidden door. There's going to be an accident. Suddenly, a person wearing a pig mask appears from behind Strahm and ambushes him. Strahm quickly loses consciousness. When Strahm regained consciousness, he found his head enclosed in a glass box, and despite his desperate cries for help, there was no response. He couldn't use his hands to open the reinforced glass box on top of him. To make matters worse, 2 water pipes were inserted into the box, with buckets of water connected above them. It was then that Strahm realized the dire situation. His belongings had been taken and placed aside by the captor. Before he could even figure out how to save himself, the mechanical device above him was activated, and water began flowing into the glass box below. Strahm could only watch helplessly as the water submerged him. In this moment of crisis, Strahm accidentally discovered a ballpoint pen in his pocket. In order to survive, he resorted to an extreme self-rescue method. He first stabbed the pen into the throat tube, allowing him to breathe normally after quickly removing the pen cap. Strahm had called the department before arriving at the location. As the police arrived, Hoffman had already rescued Jeff's child. Detective Rigg, who had been shot and lost too much blood, had already passed away. When Hoffman thought that everyone else had been dealt with, he never expected that Detective Strahm had survived within the mechanism. This surviving individual, Strahm, made Hoffman realize the existence of a threat. He soon received an anonymous letter in the mail with a "I know who you are" message. Hoffman believed it was likely a warning from Strahm because Strahm had always suspected the involvement of a third party assisting Jigsaw. Strahm's colleague, Perez, didn't survive the previous incident, but in her final words, she mentioned Hoffman's name. Furthermore, Detective Hoffman emerged unharmed from this game test. Strahm became even more convinced that Hoffman was undoubtedly connected to this matter. Jigsaw, who was always meticulous, couldn't possibly have made such a mistake. Faced with Strahm's questioning, Hoffman indignantly claimed to be a victim himself and stated that he had rescued a girl. Without evidence, Detective Strahm had nothing to say. As a result of Detective Strahm's unauthorized actions, his superior, Erickson, informed him that he no longer had the authority to investigate the case. Erickson granted him sick leave to recover from his injuries. However, Strahm had no intention of giving up the investigation, especially after losing his partner, Perez. So, Strahm secretly went to the archive room and found information about Hoffman. Strahm made a significant discovery. It turned out that years ago, Hoffman's sister was accidentally killed by her boyfriend. However, later on, the boyfriend was subjected to Jigsaw's game punishment and died. The two made instant sense to Strahm. Following this lead, Strahm arrived at the place where the victims were punished, and the victim turned out to be Seth, who had been bisected earlier. It wasn't Jigsaw who had orchestrated this, but rather the work of Hoffman's hands. It turns out that Hoffman's sister was accidentally killed by Seth. Seth was sent to prison and sentenced to 25 years, but due to legal loopholes, he was able to reduce his sentence by 5 years and was released. This was something Hoffman couldn't accept, so Hoffman, unable to bear it, imitated Jigsaw's mechanisms and directly killed Seth. This quickly caught the attention of Jigsaw. At that time, no one had seen the infamous Jigsaw and didn't know what he looked like. Detective Hoffman was captured and taken back by Jigsaw. Jigsaw expressed that he couldn't accept being falsely accused. Furthermore, Jigsaw criticized Hoffman's mechanisms as extremely crude and flawed. The most important point was that Hoffman's imitation didn't give the victims any chance of survival. It was pure slaughter. For Jigsaw, this kind of imitation was an insult. Now Jigsaw was giving Hoffman a chance as well. He chose to release Hoffman. Hoffman could now choose to immediately arrest Jigsaw, but the price would be exposing his own secrets and ruining his life forever. Alternatively, he could choose to join Jigsaw and become a true punisher. After some brainwashing and weighing the pros and cons, Hoffman decisively chose the latter. Detective Strahm speculated that if Hoffman had joined Jigsaw since that incident, he would have been involved in all the subsequent cases. With someone like Hoffman on the inside, everything finally made sense as to how Jigsaw could execute everything so seamlessly. Hoffman could provide Jigsaw with lists and detailed information about various criminals. The two of them would then kidnap and punish the victims. Even the lightweight flashlight that was planted on the doctor was made by Hoffman. In other words, Hoffman joined Jigsaw even earlier than Amanda. Hoffman wrote the threatening letters to make Amanda break the game rules, but it was Hoffman who was caught by Jigsaw, trying to get rid of his leverage. But who could have imagined that Detective Strahm managed to escape the trap and survive? Strahm, who understood the truth, decided to secretly track Hoffman in order to find evidence. However, when Strahm traced him to a house, he found that Hoffman had disappeared without a trace. In the room, Strahm discovered a hidden door on the floor and immediately went down to the basement to investigate. In the basement, he found an open room with a glass box on top. The glass box had 2 breathing tubes attached to it, and it was filled with broken glass pieces. There was also a tape recorder inside. When Strahm played the tape recorder, he was shocked to hear Hoffman's voice.
Hello, Agent Strahm. If you are hearing this, then you have once again found what you are looking for. Or so you think. Your dedication is to be commended. But I ask you, if you have learned anything on your journey of discovery. As the old adage goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. By entering the glass box before you. Pain will be incurred, but you have a chance.
Hoffman has also come to the basement quietly, but the sound of him closing the door caused Strahm's alarm. When Hoffman arrived, he discovered that Strahm had disappeared without a trace. Strahm appeared from behind him, and Hoffman also noticed him through the reflection in the glass. The two engaged in a swift and intense fight, but it became evident that Hoffman was no match for Strahm. After a few moves, Strahm managed to trap Hoffman inside the glass box. In order to prevent Hoffman from escaping, Strahm closed the glass door. Strahm believed he had the upper hand, but then he realized that the door to the room behind him had been closed. It was too late for Strahm to open it, and he unknowingly fell into Hoffman's trap. Hoffman pointed to the unfinished recording on the floor.
However, if you choose not to, you will never be heard from again. Your body will never be found. You will simply vanish. I ask you, Special Agent Strahm, have you learned enough to trust me?
It turned out that when Strahm and Jigsaw were locked in the secret room, the design of the hidden door was created by Hoffman. It was also Hoffman who attacked Strahm wearing the pig mask. Explains that Strahm has been duped twice. Now, Strahm was in a precarious situation. The walls of the room were closing in, compressing the space around him. What's even more terrifying is that Strahm was unaware that he had been labeled as the third party. In fact, he had unwittingly cleared Hoffman of suspicion. In his investigation of Hoffman, Hoffman had already set up a perfect framing plan. He leaked information about the involvement of a third party in the secret room case to Strahm's superior, Erickson. and hinted that the third party was likely an insider. Even Jill suddenly appeared before Erickson, accusing Detective Strahm and suspecting him of tracking her. The reason Jill did this was because she received a boxed relic from Jigsaw. As for what was inside the box, it remains unknown at this time. Strahm's discreet investigation of the materials coincidentally caught the attention of Erickson, who witnessed his suspicious behavior. All these factors pointed towards Strahm as the prime suspect. Erickson couldn't reach Strahm to find out where he had gone. To make Strahm a victim, Hoffman stealthily took Strahm's phone, which he had left at the crime scene. Hoffman intentionally used Strahm's phone to call Erickson and then hung up and turned it off. Hoffman suggested that Erickson could track Strahm's whereabouts through the phone, and Erickson quickly fell for it. When Strahm thought he'd found out the truth and was ready to go after Hoffman, he didn't know that he was the one being lured there, and Hoffman took Strahm's phone to a surveillance room where he switched on Hoffman's phone for the police to trace. Because no one knew that there was another escape room game going on, this one was also planned by Jigsaw before he died and passed it on to Hoffman. When Erickson arrived at the scene and discovered Strahm's phone, he would undoubtedly believe that Strahm was the third party involved. As expected, Erickson found a survivor from the room game and, through a phone call, realized that Strahm's phone was present there. He immediately notified the department to issue a pursuit order for Strahm. However, unbeknownst to him, Strahm was already trapped by Hoffman in the secret room. It was only then that Strahm realized that hiding inside the glass box was his only means of escape. But now he couldn't break the glass even with a gun. As the glass box became fully embedded underground, Strahm faced the advancing iron walls on both sides and had no choice but to climb upward. However, the iron grate above him couldn't be opened. Strahm could only helplessly watch as the moving walls crushed him, reducing him to minced flesh.